Our second speaker is Jehane Samaha. She is with the USDA Forest Service and is the National Urban Forestry or the National Urban Nursery Specialist. Um, Prior to this position, she was conducting tree phenology research and woody propagation research at the Arnold and Morris Arboreta. And she completed a multidisciplinary master's thesis on urban tree species selection with the University of British Columbia School of Forestry. She also has, in her career, coordinated the planting of over 3,500 urban trees with the Tree Tenders program for the Philadelphia Horticultural Society. So quite a list of accomplishments so far. And with that, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Andrew, and good morning, everybody. Excited to be here and talk about this exciting issue, having everyone in the same room. So yeah, as Andrew mentioned, I'm brand new at the Forest Service. I'm the new urban nursery specialist. And in this role, I serve as the link between the Ringer and the UCF programs. Ringer meaning reforestation, nurseries, and genetic resources, and UCF meaning urban and community forestry. So really in this role, I'm developing trainings and networking for both urban foresters and nursery growers to improve stock quality, enhance connectivity in the urban nursery pipeline, and also promote climate adaptive genetics for urban trees. And I'm still based in Philadelphia, so close-ish to the region that we're focusing on today. So today I'll be talking fairly broadly about tree supply for urban forestry, and my hope is that we're going to get everyone excited for a great day of presentations coming up and also the many opportunities to collaborate with each other. And we won't spend too much time talking on the challenges today, but we'll discuss some hot topics, I'm calling them, in more depth, and then dive into some solutions and resources. So first off, kind of my call to action today is all about communication, and there's no single cure-all for every challenge we're going to hear about today, but there are a lot of smaller solutions and that each one depend on us kind of strengthening connections and learning from each other and working across the nursery pipeline. So my more specific call to action today is meet at least one new person virtually who you'd like to connect with after the forum, and we'll do an exercise later to help make those connections. So first off, we're going to touch briefly on some of the challenges facing us. And we really, so many of us see these challenges every day. But as we are scaling up nursery production in the face of IRA funding and other investments, we need that quantity to meet the demand for more trees, but those trees also, we need them to be high quality and genetically diverse and also adapted to urban stressors and future climates. So we're asking a lot of our trees, we're asking a lot of our nurseries, and we're asking a lot of our urban foresters. And as we try to work through challenges, other challenges cascade, to meet these demands. How do we develop workforce? How do we, smooth different sticking points in the nursery pipeline, like sourcing seeds and liners? And then at the end of the pipeline, making sure that we're planting trees that will actually survive urban stressors is just always going to be an issue in our city environments. Whoops. So this supply and demand cycle in nurseries is kind of an infinite loop that we can get stuck in and can end up constricting our choices where, urban foresters are choosing what trees are planted in cities based on what's available in the nursery as one factor. And then nurseries are deciding what trees to grow in part based on what consumers are actually buying. And so unless we kind of break this loop with more communication between the suppliers and the buyers and more information, we'll end up with a narrowing range of choices that aren't necessarily going to address all the challenges we need to address. But I don't want to linger today on the challenges. We really want to dive into some hot topics and then later on some solutions. So these are some hot topics that I've, been really wanting to share with everybody here. And first off, on most people's mind in this room is the IRA funding, Inflation Reduction Act, dedicated $1.5 billion to the Urban and Community Forestry Program. And this will be available until 2031. It's really prioritizing projects that benefit underserved populations in urban areas across the country for tree planting, but also maintenance, also all sorts of other activities. Um, and so if y'all could use really quickly on the Teams platform, click that little button with the hand raise if this is your first time hearing about IRA funding for urban forestry, or if you only heard about it recently. I'm curious. All right. A few hands raising. Thank you. And so, this is one thing that there's been a lot of news about IRA funding, but we want to make sure that especially people in the nursery industry are hearing about this type of funding that affects the pipeline they're a part of earlier. Another one that might be a little bit newer for everybody to hear about is the Farm Bill funding. So this is only proposed right now because we're still working under the 2018 Farm Bill, which has been extended through September 30th, 2024. And it most likely that same funding will be extended until 2025 with no changes. However, the proposed revisions to the Farm Bill are really exciting. And so if this does go to a vote, we're hoping that everybody will let their representatives know whether they support this. But we're really excited that this new Farm Bill funding would give more staff to support reforestation nurseries across the country, which would mean more technical assistance and workforce development training. And also, excitingly, this would create a grant program for state nurseries, tribal nurseries, and private nurseries, which is very urban relevant, to improve the nursery production capacity. So 25 million a year is really just the teensiest fraction of the Farm Bill, but it's a lot of money for this industry to, invest in new equipment or invest in workforce training. So start thinking now about what you would propose to develop your nursery workforce and to grow your capacity. And let your senators and Congress people know what you think. But as we're thinking about funding, I'm hearing people discuss a lot mismatches between timelines because we have, the funding for urban forestry projects goes through booms and busts, and that makes it really difficult sometimes for urban foresters and tree buyers to give nurseries the security that those businesses need. And so wherever possible, trying to increase communication for funders, planters, and growers to all work towards being more proactive and like sharing with each other what their timelines are so that we can sync this up as much as possible. Another hot topic I'm getting a lot of questions about, especially as different municipalities are thinking about scaling up, is the possibility of creating new nurseries. And some of these projects are for actual tree production from beginning to end, but a lot of these ideas are more about material holding yards. So we wouldn't even fully call them nurseries all the time, although they serve a similar function. But having this kind of space and facility can really help a city or municipality deal with some of the irregularity in procurement. So if nothing's available one month, but you want to buy something next month that will, be enough for your whole year when it's actually available. If you have a holding yard, you can hold onto those trees, keep them watered, keep them ready so that you actually have control over when and how your trees are going out of the landscape. But all of these issues, really need a cost benefit analysis. Does this make sense versus just buying as you need from an existing nursery? Land access is always an issue. You know, you get, yes, more control over your species and what stock type is available. And it's also a good workforce development possibility if you have programs in your city. So anyways, if you are successfully running a municipal nursery already, or if you're considering starting one, please feel free to reach out to me so I can help make mentorship connections between brand new nurseries and existing ones, and also to share your stories with others. I've been getting a lot of queries about this, and there's a lot of potential here. And a topic on everybody's mind is climate adaptation these days. And, I really believe that urban environments obviously are very unique in comparison to surrounding native environments. And I think as we're choosing the right tree for the right place for cities, we need to consider both native and non-native species. We need non-native species to cope with really disturbed soils, the warm temperatures, the limited space and pollution levels in many harsh urban sites. And we also need natives as a first choice in kind of the comfier sites in urban areas. But for all of these trees, native or non-native, we need nurseries to advertise more than just the aesthetics of their cultivars. We really need nurseries to advertise how tolerant trees are to drought and heat, because urban foresters want trees that survive. That's sort of criteria number one. And getting back to communication, urban foresters need to close that communication loop by letting the nursery industry know the mortality rates of different trees. And that communication is a full circle. So urban and suburban areas are also pretty hooked on these kind of reliable and marketable cultivars. However, we also need to move towards more genetic diversity where possible. And to make this possible, the seed collection industry needs to be developed for hardwoods. And we need to smooth the nursery pipeline to bring liners of known provenance to growers. So the provenance is where a seed was collected, where the genetics originally are from of a particular tree. And if we know that provenance, we can make smarter choices about moving southern species north and into the warmer urban areas. And I wanted to point out this manual seed transfer guidelines for important tree species in the eastern United States. It's recently published by the team I'm on, the Ringer team. And this map here is showing from this spring, from March to May, the diversion from normal of temperatures that this spring 2024 was extremely warm compared to historical records. And just one thing I wanted to offer on this topic is if you and your city, your municipality are reviewing your species list for planting, or if nurseries are reviewing what species you want to grow, feel free to invite me to facilitate those conversations. And I'd love to get growers and buyers in the same room to talk it through. I'd really love to get everybody talking and working through that decision process. Next hot topic is root quality. So this has been, a perpetual issue, especially for container trees, for some bald and burlap trees. Bare root trees, we tend to see better root issues, or at least the issues are more obvious and remediable. And so since these can be so invisible at the nursery, and since they're death sentences for trees if they're not corrected, conversations about this can be tense between growers and buyers. Oops. Switch slides too fast. And it can be difficult for nurseries to address all of these root issues at every stage of production while still minimizing their costs. Buyers might need to budget more for higher costs to give nurseries that wiggle room to really achieve these standards that we're asking them for. And also building these clear standards up front, into contracts about what root systems will be rejected can really help those conversations to have clarity up front. And with this topic, I'd like to offer, if you are meeting with your nursery to tag some trees and inspect their root systems, Feel free to invite me to your field visit, especially, in the Mid-Atlantic region. Or, we could do trainings for your tagging team, either virtually or in person. That's something that I'd love to offer as well. Next hot topic, contract growing. I'm not going to talk too much about this because we have two great speakers on this today, Trinity Pierce from the Chicago Region Tree Initiative and James Ketchell from New York City Parks are both going to speak about their experience with contract growing. But this is, hailed as a solution to reduce risk for both growers and buyers and can really help us move from that reactive funding to proactive funding. So I also wanted to say you can scan this QR code right now in the presentation. We'll bring you to a webinar that we hosted in June, this past June, on contract growing. And also feel free to email me for examples of contracts and also send me your examples of contracts. I want to read them all. Thanks. So back to our outline, we've kind of talked through some of these hot topics, and now we're going to talk about a few different collective solutions. And we've already alluded to some important solutions here today, but in this next portion, I'll discuss them in more depth. And I'm calling these solutions collective because we'll all need to work together and coordinate and make this happen. And as we're going through them, think about, if a particular solution seems relevant to your work, or feel free to put in the chat if you have other solutions to bring up. But really think about like where you fit in this puzzle and what you want to be, making an impact on. So first off, thinking about solutions for our funding issues, really moving towards proactivity. So working to get buy-in from lawmakers and getting our public funding as consistent as possible, not just for tree planting, but to also support the nursery industry all the way through that process. I think finding ways to align timelines for grant funding with actual projects and also being as proactive as possible about communicating not just to urban foresters, but also to the entire nursery industry. This is what's on the horizon in terms of grant funding so that that information does not just trickle down to the growers, but is actually communicated with them directly. I think having secure funding for technical staff written into all of this is very important. And again, we're going to talk much more later today about contract growing, but I think something that I'll be working on is creating an online source for like a uniform growing contract template. So instead of just many, many examples for you to collate, having something that can be as clear and standardized as possible that you can still adapt. And one thing to mention is, as we're thinking about collective solutions for funding, thinking about, okay, so say you're in a much smaller municipality and you don't have perhaps the buying power to contract grow a large number of trees. Think about ways to collaborate with other small municipalities to go in on bigger orders or to work with larger organizations with your state to contract directly with nurseries so that that supply is really available to you in your region. Another collective solution that we all need to work on is how to bring on new capacity. So, growing in-house, we discussed the possibilities of having a holding yard or having an internal nursery in a city or municipality, but also like really connecting into the state nursery system, especially for smaller stock and liners, might be something to explore for the future. And then another thing to all be brainstorming about is how can we get more bare root nurseries available to this industry? There's a lot of emphasis on bulb and burlap and container trees, but bare root trees have a great success in certain cities and urban environments. And that's something to consider to really be scaling up using bare root trees. And I want to point out there's a lot of resources on the Ringer website about planning new nurseries, planning how to develop new capacity in your nursery. So feel free to explore the manuals on the Ringer website. And then in terms of how to actually get to these solutions, we need more education and we need more workforce development. And we'll have two talks on some of these topics later in our last panel today, including nursery grades and standards with Mike Marshall and tree nursery workforce development with Kelly Lewis later today that will discuss those. But yeah, I am available for presentations and for, education about this entire process of like how to increase communication across the pipeline. And then we also want to be working on strengthening our nursery standards and specifications. I especially am excited about increasing training for seed collection, but one reason this is like a collective solution is once we're working on training that workforce, that means we actually have to get people using those seeds. So all working together on where are the seeds coming from and where are they going. And really, the theme of this presentation is network building, having more communication between urban foresters and growers, getting the buyers out to the nurseries to really look at trees, really understand how growers are growing them. And to build that network, we kind of need to understand on a bigger picture too what is going on and where nurseries are around us. So improving a nationwide nursery directory is on the docket. There's going to be a group working on really adding urban specific nurseries to our nursery directory, and I'll have a slide showing that later. A centralized availability-based database has been proposed at different points and is much harder to execute because all of you are keeping your, or all of you growers at least, are keeping your information in different formats about what you're growing. You're inventorying at different times of the year. So keeping a database like that actually updated on a nationwide scale would be tough. Think about it though. And of course, just, building these relationships and partnerships is so crucial. So with that in mind, we're going to do a little exercise to introduce yourself in the chat. So if everybody could open up their chat and you're going to put in the chat your name, your organization, and your role, and then one very specific issue in your work that others could help with. And I say specific, like super specific. Like here's some examples. I can't find large caliber bare root southern oak species, or I'm trying to start a nursery and I need mentoring, or I need to circulate a job posting, something along those lines. And we're going to start a 1-minute timer and everybody can write in the chat. Thanks, everyone. And next, we're going to have a minute and a half, a whole minute and a half to reply to someone in the chat. So, we all have this role to play in helping each other out, right? And so go ahead and in the chat, just give a wave to somebody you don't know. Maybe mention if you be interested in working with them on the issue they're talking about. And if you do want to collaborate with them on that, think about sharing your contact information directly with them. All right, 15 seconds left. Go ahead and give a thumbs up to someone's comment or give them a wave. Quick reply if you have time. All right, thanks everybody for doing that. And this chat will be here for the rest of the day, so feel free to continue, mentioning things as they come up and replying to your colleagues. We're here to talk to each other, even though we're all sitting on these screens. It's more fun this way. So we talked through in general, some of these collective solutions, and now I want to talk a little bit about the Ringer team that I'm on and what we offer generally. So Ringer is reforestation, nurseries, and genetic resources. And this team is kind of weird for the Forest Service because we work across all areas of the Forest Service. So state and private forestry and tribal forestry, like the National Forest System, research and development, international programs, as well as there's one more that I'm forgetting. Anyways, and this resources and technology that this team develops is used worldwide. And this team is expanding. So my new role is part of this expansion. But there's a lot of demand for information and technology on seed and seedling production, reforestation, germplasm conservation, assisted migration, and just training on everything, training on all of the above. And briefly, this is the team as it exists currently. So we have a bunch of people in the Washington office. I am one of the national specialists on the topic of urban nurseries. We also have a national specialist, Paul, on pests and diseases. So it might be relevant to a lot of you who are thinking about pests and diseases in your cities or in your nurseries. The National Seed Lab is part of Ringer, so Vic Venkis is the director there. And then we also have regional specialists looking at the Eastern region is Carrie Pike. Emily Rose is in the Southern region. Nabil is in the Western region. And Emily has a great job. She does all the tropical islands. And then we also have folks working in international programs and editing various publications and websites for us. So nursery production requires so much skill, and the Ringer team is here to help with questions of plant physiology and morphology. Here to talk about genetics. Carrie is our geneticist. She's amazing. Things about soil quality, general environmental conditions. We can come do nursery visits and do soil tests with you and water tests with you. Things about seed technology. The National Seed Lab is a place where you can send seed samples to be tested for viability, for diseases, and also work on like storage issues and germination issues with them. We have a lot of, offerings about how to actually grow the plants. So culturing techniques, pest management, storage and handling, and then also a lot of what I've been talking about today with building this network, it really comes down to customer relations, like how to create contracts between these different groups and how to administer these projects. And this world of technical assistance is really a lot of manuals and guidebooks, on-site visits that I mentioned. You can reach me by email. I don't have a phone number yet because I'm new, but email is great. And we're really here to help. We're accessible resources. There are so many publications on the Ringer website. So go to rngr.net to find these. And all of these are free digitally, and you can also order free hard copies as well. There's a form for that. And you can also sign up for Tree Planters Notes, which is a publication twice a year put out by this team. And also think about writing something for Tree Planters Notes. Everybody who's on here, if you have an idea, feel free to get in touch with me about that. We host annual conferences, especially in different regions, such as the West and the Northeast and Southern conferences switch off every year. So we just had Southern Conference in Arkansas a couple of weeks ago. Conferences for the Intertribal Nursery Council, and then a Hawaii Growers Association conference. And these trainings and workshops can look like a lot of things tailored to people's needs, but we love to host trainings at people's nurseries, especially, and pull together folks from a lot of different nurseries, and especially as we're trying to bridge the urban and community forestry groups with the nurseries. We want to get everybody at these trainings together so that that networking and learning happens together. There's a lot in our group about research. I won't go into too much since, Andrew, what time am I supposed to end at?
You have until 10 if you like.
Oh, okay. I might go a little shorter than that actually then,
No
but
worries.
maybe we can have
We
some
have,
time for questions.
yeah, we have a break after this, so we have plenty of room for you to go as long as you want.
Great, thank you. Um, yeah, so there's actually an open research position on our team right now. Somebody just retired, but historically, there's been a lot of research on the different production techniques, on, everything that needs to go into these guides to make this as clear as possible, about what the best practices are. The National Seed Laboratory is so cool and goes along with the seed manual, but there's really interesting technologies there. A lot of development of protocols for seed cleaning and storage, seed germination testing, and also preserving genetics of different trees. So Ringer, really recognizes that nurseries are not just kind of like a peripheral thing that we just kind of need to get other stuff done. They're actually really central. They're a hub for meeting all these ecological, economic, and social goals. If we think about climate change mitigation, we can't slice out nurseries to be just a completely separate thing. Nurseries are a central part of the solutions that we need. The Ringer team has mostly focused on like rural, wide scale landscape restoration of forests. And my position is the first role that is focusing on urban areas. So a lot is shifting in the team to kind of accommodate this new focus. So much is relevant in both areas, thinking about the biodiversity of trees in native forests and thinking about the biodiversity of trees in urban forests. We need to, be considering all of this in terms of pests, in terms of climate adaptation, in terms of how to get our ecosystems functioning to provide really direct benefits to humans in urban areas. Um, Benefits like water and air quality, and benefits like human health, food security, and livelihood. The Forest Service itself actually has several nurseries, and these are, again, really focused around kind of the more rural reforestation. So a lot of these will be extremely teensy tiny conifer trees, although there's also hardwood nurseries. But they're mostly for conifers for restoration plantings. There's also 2 seed extractories owned by the Forest Service. State nurseries have really seen a decline in numbers. At one time, nearly every state had at least one nursery and many, many more. And now only 30 states have at least one nursery as of 2017. Um, a lot of these state nursery facilities are still there and just kind of sitting empty and unused. And this is something that I'm just starting to learn about as somebody who's coming from the urban side. But it gets my thoughts turning about, well, what can happen with those facilities? Can they be used to um, assist some of this growth that we're seeing in the urban forestry world, to bridge some of that capacity gap? And then much more classically relevant to urban is the private nursery industry. And this map shows an offering that is online on rngr.net, which is the national directory for nurseries. And we will be having a really awesome group look through this entire directory and be doing outreach to urban relevant nurseries to bridge this and to get urban nurseries onto this map. Because right now, most of these are more classical, like reforestation nurseries. But we want that urban emphasis, and we want that to be available and searchable. and to be really clear, like what types of stock are different nurseries selling? What are some of the key species that they specialize in? And we want people to be able to parse all of this on this directory. So please, if you want to, if you're a grower, add your nursery to this directory. And if you're a planter, hang tight because this will be updated in the next couple of years with way more extensive information that's relevant to cities. And then finally, this is a screenshot of the rngr.net website. So this website is managed by the Southern Regional Extension Forestry, and it makes it much more flexible for us to add resources on there. All of the RNGR publications are available as downloads or as hard copies on this site. And we also host the nursery directory that I just mentioned on this site. I am planning to, I'm planning to add a new tab on this site. You can see at the top, there's resources, seed lab, tribal, tropical. There will be an urban tab there soon is my goal, and hoping to get resources up there that are really specific to you all. If you have feedback for me about what you'd like to see on that type of tab, I'd be really curious. That's what I've been collecting a lot of input on. And I also hope to get, more and more examples of contracts for contract growing on there, videos or for how-tos and all sorts of good stuff. And yeah, I hope that you all feel comfortable reaching out to me and taking advantage of those resources. This is my email address, just my first name, Jehane, my last name, Samaha at USDA.gov. And I would really love to be in touch with you all. So thank you for listening today. Andrew, I'll hand it back to you. I don't know if you want to do any questions or.
Yeah, I think we can open up for questions and answers. We have dedicated question and answer sessions for the afternoon sessions, but here it's just kind of as we have them. So if you have a question, Jehane, there is a question and answer tab, and you can just put a post in there. That way it keeps them from getting lost in the chat with all the other things. So, and yeah, thanks for, there are reactions. So why don't we give her a clap right here?
Thanks.
As a speaker, like those actually do help because otherwise you feel like you're talking in the void. So
Yeah, thanks.
and if a joke lands, don't be afraid to laugh. So any questions? So Jason had a question, which was, I can maximize it. Is anyone out there in a landscape architect or from a LA firm that tags trees in the nursery and checks when they get on site? Yeah, so Jehane mentioned that she would work with folks to do tree tagging. What does that entail, Jehane? What kind of training? Have you done that already with people? Have they enjoyed that process of learning how to do that?
I've done tree tagging myself. It will be new and exciting for me to train a crew on this. I really love James Ketchell shared with me their workforce development guide for tree tagging in New York. So they have a wonderful picture guide to show what to be looking for at the nursery. And training on tagging trees will depend on what you're looking for, what your goals are, what type of stock you're trying to buy. But there will also be some basic things that are universal that you're looking for. So I think I would love, just to have that opportunity to walk through with people and show the system of what to look for and when, in terms of looking at the roots, looking at the branches, looking at clearances, looking at caliper, and really thinking about what's right for your project. Oh, I see another question in the chat. Thanks everyone for your patience. Clearly the chat's gotten long. What's the capacity of the National Seed Lab? Is this for smaller projects or is there support available for large-scale statewide seed testing needs? Um, the capacity of the National Seed Lab is pretty big, although they just lost a few staff. That's, I think, causing some delays for them. Um, but yes, they can definitely do seed testing for like much larger lots of seed and can support larger projects. And I think that question came from Jessica, and I can put the Seed Lab email address in the chat for you. Just 1 minute.
Yeah, and it looks like the question and answer board is working now. So someone must have hit the toggle for us, which is what I saw. Someone had a question, is your team, Ranger team, is it looking into like food forests or any food producing trees?
Um, I definitely want, like, as in the urban role, want to incorporate that because I think that food forests, even though they're sort of a small percentage of what people are doing in urban forestry, it's a really impactful type of planting in a city to have more food access. Um, and I know I've been working like so far with a group in Detroit that is doing nursery testing on some hickories to see how they can actually do micro nurseries within their city to grow that tree, which is typically pretty slow and difficult to grow with a taproot. But that they want to get more hickories around Detroit in that food forestry way and are working with like small nurseries within the actual city to make that happen. So there's a lot of unique projects around food forestry that I would definitely be happy to talk with folks about.
And then we have maybe one last question. Chris, in the question and answer session, which is now working, Christopher asks, is there any effort out there to get a national standard for quality like they have in like local regions like Florida, for example? You mentioned a little bit on the quality issue for roots. Does that translate to a standard?
So the ANSI standards for nursery quality are not as specific as I would like them to be. I think, that's like a huge multi-organization kind of project to pull together some process to adjust those, which I'm brand new, but like that's definitely in my mind of like how do I get to the point where I understand all those groups well enough that I can help push towards uh more useful standards
Hmm.
and more specific. The Florida standards are wonderful, and I also recently got translated the Swedish nursery standards, which are just fantastic. And they have an incredible technological tracking system for their trees that like really shows the provenance and like all the whole history of the tree, every nursery that it's been through in its life. And they actually use these tiny little microchips that they insert into the bark and can go through with a scanner and scan those trees. So that's detailed in their standards, but also, if you search the ANSI American standards, even the word provenance is never mentioned. That's just not in the language. But in the Swedish standards, they're talking about it like 10 times in that document, that it's very relevant, just as one example. And yeah, I think that having standards nationally would be really helpful. I think that in the meantime, we can work this through in terms of like having sets of standards that can be used in different contracts that are just like really clear and can be adapted based on the needs of different projects is what I'm hoping for in the shorter term. Not not developed yet, but that's what I want to do with everyone's help.
I imagine that the Swedish standards look like an IKEA instruction manual. That's how I want them
They're
to be.
they're quite aesthetically pleasing for sure.
Nice. And then one last question, we'll go to break. Are there any concrete guidelines for what qualifies as climate ready or climate adaptive? I worry. The restoration side, how we align those goals with wanting to adhere to reference sites and natural successional plant communities. So definitions for climate ready or climate adaptive.
Yeah, can you repeat the last sentence? Because it sounds like they're coming from a more natural
Yeah, it says I worry
setting.
on the restoration side how we align those goals with wanting to adhere to the reference sites and natural succession plant communities. So like what was there already, but then what's the future hold for the site, you know?
Yeah. So there's so many different methods to determine like what a future climate will be like in a particular area. And it's like, are you thinking about like the scenario for 2080 with like low emissions or high emissions? And like, are you thinking about what the changes in the hydrological cycle will be with extreme drought or extreme periods of rain, flooding? And so all of that has to be taken into account. And I know one really great methodology is the Northern Institute for Applied Climate Science, NIACS, NIACS. Uh, they have a climate adaptation workbook and that can help walk you through those steps in your area. And they also have already like done that work for a lot of different urban areas, specifically around the US. So you can see their list of what is under different climate scenarios likely to be adaptive or likely to be maladaptive. Um, and I think especially for natural areas, it can actually be a little bit simpler to go through that process than in urban areas where there's like variables of heat island effects and all sorts of things. Um, and also like a much wider palette of species under consideration, uh, including both native and non-native trees. I hope that answers the question. Be happy to put some more resources in the chat after this.